that one kid in school that's like, "Hey, did you know if you pause this movie just right, you could see her nipple?" Like,
That is me. I was that kid. I am still that kid. I am still that kid. Hey guys, welcome to the Video Express, where we dust off old VHS tapes and discuss all things horror, sci-fi, and exploitation. I'm Matt.
and I'm Katie.
Let's get things rolling. Katie, tell our fine listeners what movie we are spotlighting on tonight's show.
Well, today we're headed down under with the Howling III, the Marsupials. Did you like my accent? Did I do it? Did I do it right? I hope I made every Australian listener proud. I worked really hard on that accent. Anyway, this movie is from 1987, directed by what's going to be a new show favorite, I think, Philippe Mora, who also directed The Howling 2, aka The Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, aka The Howling 2, Stirba Werewolf Bitch. So he's back, and now he's in Australia, and the werewolves are marsupials. It says all you need to know in the title right there.
Does it though? Does it really?
I don't even know if it actually scratches the surface of what's actually going on in this movie, but just if you know anything about biology, there you go. Marsupials.
Yeah. Well, before we get into all the Aussie pouch fur covered fun, Katie, why don't we go into what's going on in the cinema world today?
Yes. So I have three movies to recommend today, and by the time people are actually listening to this, we're going to be probably in January of or in the first part of 2021. So these movies might have been out for a bit by the time you are listening to this, but with me, I feel like there's just so many movies coming out all the time. It's really easy to miss something, especially when there's like 10 different streaming services, all with their own exclusives and whatnot. So these are just a few movies that I think our listeners would be interested in. So the first one is a Shudder exclusive that came out. I think it only came out like a week ago at the time of me recording this. It's called Anything for Jackson. I watched this movie the other day, and it is absolutely batshit insane, and it's very fun. So I'll just read you. I'll read you the blurb, the tiny little blurb, and that's all I'm going to give you about it. A bereaved Satanist couple kidnap a pregnant woman so they can use an ancient spell book to put their dead grandson's spirit into her unborn child, but end up summoning more than they bargained for. So just take a moment and
I
digest
like
that. Yes. So yeah, it's a sweet old grandma and grandpa, and they're dabbling in shit that they don't need to be dabbling in, and they get in way over their head, and it's a good fun satanic time for everybody.
I've heard a lot of rumblings about it. I haven't heard anybody say anything negative yet about it. I've heard mostly positive. I've heard
Mhm.
ranging from it being amazing to uh, good. I haven't really heard any middle of the road or negative about it. So I definitely can't wait to check that one out.
Yeah, I mean, I would, to each their own. I would say, I don't know if I'd say it's amazing, but it's definitely very good. And I would say it's one of the better ones I've seen in 2020. So yeah, definitely look into that. This next one is on Netflix, and it came out in October of 2020, I think, and it's called Vampires versus the Bronx. And this one is a little bit
Oh,
more
okay.
lighthearted. It's not a full on, like gory, scary horror. It definitely gives me some Monster Squad vibes. And it is
Nice.
about a group of young friends who live in the Bronx, and their neighborhood is slowly, with each year becoming more and more gentrified. A lot of local businesses getting bought by kind of like bougie, like artisanal sandwich shops and whatnot. So they feel the identity of their neighborhood is being stripped away, and then turns out that it's vampires that are doing the gentrifying. It's a group of vampires who are coming in and buying up all the property so that they can feast on the locals.
Bougie vampires.
Bougie vampires, and the kids got to band together and fight some vampires, and so it's very cute, very fun. um that one's a little bit more family friendly, I would say. If you have kids who are into this kind of thing, you could definitely watch it with your kids. It's a little, it's a little violent, but nothing too crazy. But I think any fan of horror, specifically if you liked kind of like the vibe of like the Goonies and Monster Squad and movies like that, you'll like this one.
Cool. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often that we get that genre of movie anymore where it's, the kids.
Yeah. I was thinking about that recently. Actually, I saw. I wish I could remember who tweeted it, but somebody in horror Twitter land was tweeting about how they didn't. If they feel like kids now don't really have like kid friendly like horror intro horror to get them into the genre now. Whereas like when you were growing up, and when I was growing up, we had Monster Squad and the Goonies and a ton of other like kid friendly adventure movies that had like these horror themes
Right.
to it. So I think, yeah, this is definitely a return to that kind of feeling.
I think the biggest problem is filmmakers and studios shy away from that specific genre just because of the track record of those types of movies. Like I mean, I don't know a single person that doesn't uh absolutely love and cherish the Monster Squad. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. But, people forget that that movie was literally a box office bomb when it hit theaters, and
Hmm.
it only played in theaters for 2 weeks before it was pulled.
Oh wow.
Um yeah, Monster Squad didn't find its audience until the, VHS home video, and that's where it's over the years picked up. And that's why I don't think there's many of these movies made now. It's just because people don't know if there's an audience for it or not. But I do wish there was more of it for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm hoping with streaming becoming, especially in 2020, becoming the only way to watch movies right now.
Right.
I'm hoping that people will be more willing to take that risk. Especially, I mean, I think Vampires versus the Bronx did pretty well on Netflix. So I mean, I would hope that it would inspire them to keep it up. Um, but the third recommendation I have today is a movie that I actually have not had time to sit down and watch yet, but I watched the trailer and I've heard enough buzz about it that I have a feeling that anyone listening to this podcast may be very intrigued by it. So this is another, I don't know if it's a Shudder exclusive, but it was recently added to Shudder, and it's called Porno. And it's from 2020.
You have my
Maybe
attention.
made in late 2019. Yeah, so I thought that'd have your attention. So it's about they're teenagers that work at a movie theater in the early 90s in a small Christian town, which, Matt, that might resonate with you.
Even yep,
And
very much so.
they 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 discover a mysterious old film hidden in the basement, and upon watching the film they actually unleash a sex demon, aka a succubus. And all hell breaks loose from there, and it looks like super gory, super over the top, like just splatter movie, but also like really funny. It just feels like kind of a callback to some grindhousey type movies. So I again, I haven't seen it myself, so I can't give you an honest review, but it seems really really awesome. And I watched the trailer and I was just super into it.
Remind me over Christmas break to watch that because I've not even seen the trailer, and just what you said sounds fucking awesome and right up my alley. So
Yeah, I
I
thought
want
of you when I saw the trailer.
yeah. I mean, I now not to call myself out, but I've got a Shutter subscription. But let's face it, I mostly have that for Last Drive in Joe Bob Briggs. And it's
Yeah.
bad of me to do this, but it's like when Joe Bob's not on, I forget to watch the channel. And there's so much good shit on there that I need to straighten my
Mhm.
ass up and get on the ball and watch these amazing movies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar boat. I mean, I try to watch Shudder as much as I can, but they've got so much stuff, and there's so many other streaming services that I also use. Which, speaking of the fourth recommendation I have is not a movie, but it is just a little tip for anyone trying just to find good horror to stream. So, as I've been mentioning, there's so many streaming services, and if you subscribe to all of them, that can be a little pricey per
Mm.
month. So, depending on your situation, that could be a huge chunk of your monthly income just to have a bunch of things to browse and never pick anything to watch. Um, so, I was recently looking at Tubi, Tubi. They are
Yeah,
a free streaming site, and their horror catalog is fantastic. They have some crazy out there, they have horror movies that I've not seen on other platforms, or that I've only seen available, like the only way to watch it is that you have to pay for it and rent it.
right.
So if you're not trying to fork out however much money a month on a streaming service, and you're really looking to watch some horror movies, go check out Tubi, Tubi. Not they've not endorsed us, but I just really like them.
Yeah, I've been a flag waver of Tubi for like years now. I watch Tubi at least 4 days a week. Just because not
Yeah.
and not not just because of their horror selection. Um, you know me, I'm a giant kid and I love my cartoons. They also have a fantastic catalog of cartoons from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I mean, how they've even got the Mr. T cartoon on there. So much cool shit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of the like the Image Comics cartoons that were like only ran for like one season in the 90s. They've got like the Wildcats and those types of cartoons. So I mean, it's not they've like you said, the horror selection is fucking fantastic, but they've got such a great catalog of every Mystery Science Theater, Riff Tracks episode. I mean, and like you
Mhm.
said, it's all for fucking free, man. So yeah,
I
if
keep
you're
waiting for the other shoe to drop. I keep waiting to find out what the catch is, but there isn't. Like, you don't even have to make an account. You don't even have
right,
to give them your email. You just go there, and there's movies, and you watch them, and there are ads. But like,
right,
come on, I'll take a few ads to not have to give them my information and pay for it. So,
fuck yeah.
but yeah, that's all I got for recommendations.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and just skip the stone right over to the movie. Katie, how many times have you seen this movie?
Okay, so this is my second time watching it. It might as well have been my first time. The first time I watched it was in high school, so that was probably like, oh my god, how long ago was that? Like 10, 12 plus years ago, I think, at this point. So and literally all I remembered was the birth scene, which I think is what most people remember from this movie. So that was all I
Yeah.
knew. And as I was watching it, there were a few scenes that kind of jumped out. I was like, oh yeah, that part. But this might as well have been my first time, and I thought it was interesting. I think I really like what they were going for. I like that it feels like they kind of embraced the comedy aspect of this. They really played up the humor, whereas like in The Howling 2, I feel like a lot of the humor was maybe unintentional or just due to like weird wonky editing and just like weird production mishaps. This was an intentionally funny movie. So some of that I really think made it a little bit more charming for me in the long run. That being said, the plot, as with any Philippe Mora movie, apparently is just a mess. It's just all over the place. There's too much happening, and we'll get into some details later. But overall, I thought it was fun. I thought it was fun. It made me laugh and it entertained me, so it did its job.
Um, we talked on the last episode when we were talking about Howling 2, how I, no exaggeration, have seen that movie probably thousands of times. Um, I want to say I've seen Howling 3 a shit ton as well. Not quite as much as 1 or 2, but I've seen it a lot, and the reason is, that it was a staple of cable television growing up. I watched Howling 3 for the first time on USA Up All Night with, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Rhonda Shear or Gilbert Godfrey, but I do know it was on USA Up All Night. And it was, like I said, it was a staple on cable television. It was always on. If it wasn't on USA, it was on some other channel. And I always watched it because when you're a kid, you have, I hate this term more than anything, but I'm going to use it. The rose-colored glasses. So you're, the
Right.
nostalgia, the nostalgia. So when you're a kid and you're watching this type of movie, you're not picking up on the weird, for lack of a better term, dumb shit that's going on. You're kind of, you're kind of honed in on monsters and effects and you know whatever. You're there for the monsters if you're a kid like me. So I will have to say this. It had been probably a handful of years since I've watched Howling 3, and I just, of course, watched it last week to gear up for this episode. Man, I don't know. I used to say that this was a guilty pleasure, even though I don't like using that phrase guilty pleasure. Um, I used to love this movie, but watching it again, god damn, it was actually tough to sit through this time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slog. I think it really starts out promising. Like, I mean, I think promising might be too much, but it's the first hour of the movie, you're like, all right, like, it's kind of weird, kind of goofy, kind of wacky, but like, I'm on board. And then it just starts introducing too many plot points. I think there just were too many things happening at once, and it just kind of became a mess in the third act. Um, but
I
what
mean,
I
I think
find
the
really
second
interesting about this is oh yeah, yeah, by the second act, it's just but what I find interesting is that this was the only I'm not sure if it's the only PG-13 one in the whole Howling series or if it's just the first one, but this was a departure of tone from the first two, which were very gory, and then the second one, which was full of boobs, hairy, unhairy, all types. Whereas this one has I don't think there were any boobs, or if there were, it was like really brief, which is fine. But it's definitely a more toned down. I don't want to say family friendly, but like by the time you get to PG-13, it's kind of like everybody's watching it. So with that, I mean, it definitely they toned down the gore, they toned down the sex, and they turned up the humor and just the ridiculousness of it.
I do want to throw out that you said that you don't, is there any boobs in this? I don't think so, but maybe there is. I will claim because you know how I am and the type of kid that I used to be growing up watching these types of movies. That when I recorded this off of TV as a kid, I think I caught it like when I was around maybe like 11 on like HBO or some shit. And I recorded off of TV. And if you pause it just right, you can see a little, you can see a little bit of hairy boob. But it's just
There's
more.
always one. There's always that one kid in school that's like, "Hey, did you know if you pause this movie just right, you could see her nipple?" Like,
That is me. I was that kid. I am still that kid. I am still that kid.
also,
Um,
now that I think about it, isn't there actually a scene? I must have blocked it out where they show that she has many breasts, like as a dog might have,
so that wasn't
or did I
her.
make that up?
No, you didn't make that up. That wasn't her. That was the spoilers. That was the ballerina character when she's
Ah,
transformed.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Uh,
Well, yeah, she had a bunch. So I guess all of those, I don't know, I guess that counts. I guess having like 6 boobs at once makes up for like no boobs in the rest of the movie.
I I guess. Yeah.
I even wrote in my notes, the more the merrier.
Yeah. So let's. I want to reflect a little bit on some points that I brought up last episode about Felipe Mora and the tone of the Howling 2. And I think I even said on last episode I was going to, when we talked about this one, some of the parallels. So like in the last episode we talked about the editing of Howling 2 and how it was just a fucking
Mhm.
hack job of mishmash shit, just kind of like scenes thrown together, and and how there was no way in hell that the editor from the original John Carpenter's Halloween did that, and that it had to be interference by Philippe Mora. And then when you watch this one, Howling 3, while the editing is more coherent, you still see the weird tacked on shit that doesn't really make sense. And there's just like, yeah, there's proof in the pudding right there that Felipe Mora's fingerprints is all over that motherfucker when it comes to editing again, because it just it's another this poorly stitched together movie.
Yeah, and I mean, and even editing aside, there's just things that happen okay, there's a specific point in the movie that I really need to talk about, and I really need to get your take on it, because I went back and rewound it and I watched the scene again and I was so confused. I was yelling at my TV. Okay, so towards the beginning, there's a
Hmm.
part where I believe it's Professor Beckmeyer, played by Barry Otto.
Hmm.
He goes and he meets with the president of
Right,
what we don't know. Could be America, could be a company, but he's just the president. And he goes and he talks to him, and they're like standing by. I think they're standing by like a big pool. I don't even know where they are. It doesn't matter. At
yeah,
one
they're in a
point
pool.
in the conversation, they look over directly at the camera, and then they say something, the president says something like, "Oh, right, this is like for documentation." And I go, "Hold up. Is this a
Right,
mockumentary all of a sudden? What is happening?" And then they cut to like a wide shot to show that they're standing in a room and there's nobody else there. And then
right.
moments later, he dismisses this cameraman, and we never see them leave, and it never does it again for the rest of the movie. So like, what the hell was that?
I I have no fucking idea. So I actually have it written down
I did,
in my notes. Talking to the camera slash fourth wall with a question mark. Um, I've never understood that part. I never will understand that part. But yeah, it's just like just
it could
randomly.
be like a cheeky joke, but I don't, it's so random and it makes no sense and there's no reference to it later. So I'm chalking it up to Philippe Mora is just a wacky guy.
He's a wild and crazy guy, that's for sure. Um, it, all right, I feel like this entire episode is going to be me just kind of just bashing this movie. And again, I don't want that to be what our show is about praising or bashing. I just just to have fun talking about it. But I just want to say, you brought up how the tone of this movie is a complete shift from the first two. Well, I mean, let's be honest. The second one is a complete shift from the first one, but you're right. This one is
Yeah.
even more away from what they established. But then you said they ramped up the humor, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm just wondering even if that was intentional, because this this movie is just so fucking weird. And when I say that I love Howling 2 for it being weird, that's because it's a fucking awesome weird. This movie is just flat out weird. Like it
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin. All right, so
Okay,
I just want to talk about some.
first of all, let me just say, I did just want to say that I was reading an interview that somebody did with Philippe Mora, where he does say that this was 100% intended to be funny, and that he didn't understand why so many people didn't understand that it was funny. Like he was like, I don't understand why people thought we were playing it straight, because it was meant to be funny. But like we've talked before, I think some of his choices, specifically when it comes to editing, because comedy is all about timing.
Right,
And so I think some of the timing fell flat to the point where it kind of just looked like a bad movie, instead of somebody trying to intentionally be funny.
right.
There were some really funny lines in this movie, though. And the one that I wrote down that made me really happy was I think it's at the beginning when they're in there's like a U.S. government organization that tracks werewolf sightings. Apparently, who knew? And one
NIA.
of them says, "Yeah," one of them says, "I got a weird feeling," and then the other guy says, "Indigestion," and the other guy goes, "No, fear."
I
And that made me laugh. I don't
I
know if that
laugh
was meant to be funny, but I love that line.
I laugh so hard because the line isn't funny, but the timing is hilarious, and not because it's good comedy timing. It's because it's actual like the most terrible timing and the most terrible delivery, and that's why I fucking laughed. So let's like I said,
Yeah.
I don't know if the humor was like 100% intentional, but I'm pretty sure that the shit that I was laughing at was the shit that was not intentional because
Yeah.
yeah, there's a line and I can never remember Beckmeyer's buddy's name. The guy that's like his tag team
Oh,
partner
shoot.
that because so Beckmeyer believes in everything. This other guy is kind of like a non-believer. I don't remember the character's name, but
Shoot, is it
Professor
Oh,
Sharp,
is it the other professor? Professor Sharp? Yeah.
maybe so. But either way, he has this weird ass line where he's talking about a UFO video
I
where
wrote
the
that
UFO
down.
was a condom filled with dog shit and a flashlight. Who the fuck
I
writes that
am
line?
obsessed with that line. It's incredible. It's so for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, I don't remember the exact conversation, but I think the context is this professor saying that like he used to believe in the fantastical until he saw a UFO video that turned out to just be a condom filled with dog shit with
And
a
a flashlight.
flashlight.
Yeah,
And I was like, first of all, who even is there are so many ways to fake a UFO that doesn't involve any shit at all. Any shit from any animal, human, dog. You don't need that to fake a UFO. So I would love to know if that's based on something real or if it just came out of Philippe Mora's really weird brain.
yeah. Um, all right, so let me hop on track real quick. So I just want to start off like with the beginning of the movie and like some of my thoughts about the movie overall. So we were talking about the whole weird fourth wall breaking where they look at the camera and all that shit. It's funny because at
Hmm.
the very start of the movie, like the first frame of the movie, it shows this footage that's supposed to be, I guess, excuse me, it's like travel footage. I'm not sure if it's Africa or Australia, but it's like these travel people dancing around a werewolf that's tied to a post. And then it cuts to footage of this guy that's walking through like 4 feet of snow in Siberia, and he's attacked by something off screen that we don't see. And then it cuts to our main character, Beckmeyer, who's a professor, who's showing the footage of the tribe that's got the werewolf at the stake. I just thought it was weird though that before we get to Beckmeyer, when it shows those two different pieces of footage, when it cuts from one to the other, it's like a weird like sound that they throw in the editing of the cut to make it almost seem like you're changing the channel. So I don't know if
I
that
forgot about that.
yeah, I don't know if that would tie in to us, the fourth wall break of watching them on a camera. I don't fucking know. Um, that's neither here nor there. If you've never seen the movie, watch it. Tell us what the fuck you think is happening with this whole thing. But I do want to bring up one thing. The travel footage that Beckmeyer is showing. That's got the like I said. I don't know if it's supposed to be Africa or where it's at. I can't recall, but I do think that the werewolf that's tied to the stake is cool. It's supposed to be in 1905. Now it's 100% obviously a mask, but it's very dog soldiers like
Yes,
in its face. So like it's stuff like that, and like I said, I don't want to rip this movie apart. For the next hour and a half. I will say that this movie is a complete mind boggler, but that's not to say that there's not some cool shit in it. Like there is some cool moments peppered
yeah,
throughout the movie, and I don't want to dwell on like just the bad shit. So
of
yeah,
course. Yeah, there's definitely some charming parts in this movie.
but you brought up Mr. President, so the NIA finds I guess finds out that this guy in Siberia was attacked by a werewolf. So they alert the president, but the president um never says who he is. Like, we just know he's the president, and they refer to him as Mr. President, but we don't know if he's president of the United States, um, or if because it's an Australian movie, is it the president of Australia? But the actor is Michael Pate, who was in a lot of fucking westerns and shit. But it's so
Oh,
fucking off the wall. But yeah, I all right. Here's my thing: the whole movie doesn't make a lick of sense to me because we got a werewolf attack in Siberia. So they alert Professor Beckmeyer, who's basically, I guess, an expert on werewolves. So Mr. President, who, again, we don't know of what, gets in contact with Beckmeyer to put him on the case of finding these werewolves. However, we never fucking go back to Siberia. Ever.
nope. He just goes straight to so I think if I remember correctly, I think, and I would need to look this up again, but I believe that the footage that they keep showing is Aboriginal footage from Australia,
Okay.
and I want to say, and I could be getting my plot points confused, but I want to say that it is Beckmeyer's grandfather's footage because his grandfather used to invest was also into this and he like disappeared. I think, I don't know, something to do with that footage has like sparked this obsession in Beckmeyer. So even though he was assigned to this task in Siberia, he somehow is like in the back of his head obsessed with the idea of marsupial werewolves and
It's
is
just
like, I gotta find them.
it's just plot after plot after plot after plot after plot, and none of the plots even go together. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Um, but so after we're introduced to Beckmeyer and his sidekick, the other professor guy, and they're basically, I guess, tasked by the government, by the president, who of what don't know, to find werewolves and eradicate them, or whatever they're trying to do. Uh, the the scene then shifts to a village in Australia called Flow, which is fucking wolf spelled backwards. Where
So
we meet,
clever.
yeah, clever motherfuckers. Where we meet Jerboa Jerboa and her tribe
What a
of,
name.
oh my fucking god, that name. Where we meet her rapey stepfather, and a bunch of werewolf women, and I guess she runs away because her stepfather's trying to rape her, and she hops on a bus to go into the big city, and she's being trailed by werewolf nuns. I that All that just came out of my mouth sounds like some shit that somebody would make up, but here we are.
Yeah, I love the werewolf nuns, and I didn't realize until I very recently actually when I was like rereading some of the plot points that I think that aren't those like her sisters who are trying to get her and bring her back and they're just like disguised as nuns.
Yeah, they are. I didn't know that they were sisters or just like half sisters or
They're just
whatever.
part of the
But yeah,
flow
they're for
community.
whatever.
Um
Yeah, but for whatever reason, they disguise themselves as nuns, um, hunt down
yeah,
Jerboa Jerboa.
I got really excited at first before they revealed that they're werewolves. I was like, "Hell yeah, it's the Christian Avengers back again and this time it's 3 sassy nuns and they're here to kick some werewolf ass." And then they ended up turning into werewolves, which I didn't like as much, but is still very funny. It's just very fun.
I wrote
And they
down in my
show up to this like Halloween party, this costume party, and like everybody just assumes that they're in costume. It's fantastic.
I wrote down in big letters and underlining werewolf nuns because I had a couple drinks while I was watching this, hoping it would help the viewing
As
experience.
you do.
It did not, by the way. But when I wrote down
Mm.
werewolf nuns, I kept having this image in my head, and I'm sure somebody's either already done this or they're going to do this. I would do it, but somebody will beat me to the punch. I kept having this image in my head of a werewolf nun, like reaching under her skirt and pulling out a machine gun and just like mowing people down. and I chuckled to myself because I was like that random image that just popped in my head. That random 10-second image in my head is better than this entire fucking movie.
That's incredible. Any aspiring filmmakers listening, there's a free tidbit. There's a free idea.
All right. Well, so we're steadily kind of going through the movie. Tell me what you thought. Like, so when tell me what before we get to any further. How do you feel about Jerboa, who's our lead actress, our main chick?
So I actually really like her. I
Mhm.
really like I believe her name is Imogen Ansley,
Yep.
and she was one of the saving points for this movie for me. I think she's very cute, she's very pretty, she's like a great leading lady, and she did, as far as acting goes, I thought she like did about as well as anyone can do in a movie where you have to give birth to a fake marsupial werewolf baby in a barn. So I think she did as great as she could with the script that was given to her. As a character, I mean, I don't know. She's just kind of there. With this whole movie, all the characters are just kind of there. They don't really have a lot of depth to them.
No.
But she was very fun to watch, and I think that Philippe Mora was trying to make the werewolves less of the villains and more of like our protagonists and a little bit
Oh
more
yeah.
sympathetic. So I think casting her was a good idea. Um and okay, I have a quick side note about Imogen Ansley that I found out literally 15 minutes before we started recording, and I yelled from my room because I got so excited. So I was looking up her IMDb
Queen of the Damned.
because I thought, she. Yes. Oh my god. Okay, yes. Okay. So if anyone is a little baby goth like me who was coming of age during the aughts, and grew up reading Anne Rice and then watched the classic movie Queen of the Damned, which maybe one day we will discuss. um the there is a scene in that movie, and I'm trying to jog your memory for anyone who's seen it. They go to a vampire club, and there is a vampire in a British flag dress who gets exploded by Akasha. And that vampire in the British flag dress is none other than Jerboa.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, I mentioned last episode how I like doing this because I'm kind of leaving you as the technical person that gets to look up all the fun shit, and I'm just the guy that watches it, drinks a beer, and then just throws out shit that I already knew. And I'm nowhere near an Anne Rice fan like you are. Like that's one thing that I've always known about you since I've known you is how much you love Interview with the
Hmm.
Vampire and Anne Rice and everything. And of course, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I'm not really a big fan at all. I do like Queen of the Damned. It's probably been a good 10 years or more since I've last watched it, but I do. I saw it in theaters, and of course, I had the soundtrack because that's a fucking amazing soundtrack. But
Oh, it's great.
I remember watching Queen of the Damned in the theater, and when Jerboa showed up, I was like, I know that girl. Where the fuck have I seen her before? And I think it was probably like 3 hours later, laying in bed reading a Fangoria, and I probably just sat up from my bed and I was like, "Fucking Jerboa."
I love it. Um, and then I have one more side fact regarding the role of Jerboa, and then we can continue discussing the rest of the characters. But okay, if you recall, in our last episode, we had a brief aside where we discussed how Reb Brown, before he was an actor, he was a football player, and he almost made the NFL, but he
Right,
lost his spot on the team to none other than O.J. Simpson. So we
right.
briefly imagined a universe where O.J. Simpson where Red Brown took OJ Simpson's spot, and OJ Simpson perhaps never became a famous many things. We won't go into it. But so as I was looking up things for this movie, I discovered that none other than Nicole Kidman was considered for the role of Jerboa.
No
And I
shit.
looked at her IMDb. I looked up what was she doing in 1987,
She was
and
doing that
she
BMX
had
movie.
not yet. Yeah, well, yeah, she hadn't quite, I don't think she'd quite broken into, like, the worldwide or, like, American film scene yet, so she was still but she was acting regularly in Australia, and
Yeah.
she starred in a Australian miniseries in 1987 called Vietnam, where her co-star, who played her husband, was none other than Barry Otto, who plays Professor Harry Beckmeyer. So that
Ah.
is her connection to the Howling 3.
Wow, okay. Yeah, I gotta say around that time, I don't know what year it was. I know that the only thing that I could recall around the really early '80s that Nicole Kidman did was like I think it was called like BMX Bandits or some shit like that. But I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense because she's of course an Australian actress. But how much of a different movie or how her career could have changed drastically for the worse if she had been
Yeah.
Jerboa Jerboa.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I don't know if she would have ever gotten to Days of Thunder if she had made this movie, and then it makes me think, would Imogen Ansley become would they have just traded spots? Would she have ended up married to Tom Cruise? Would she have ended up in Moulin Rouge and Eyes Wide Shut? We'll never know, but it's fun to imagine.
That is fun to imagine. Especially because the one word that I wrote down beside Imogen Ansley was babe in all capital letters and underlined.
Yeah,
Um,
she's a super babe.
she is beautiful, man. Like she's one of those she's one of those characters slash actors that when she's on screen, it's hard to take your eyes off of her. She's got that
Mhm.
natural beauty about her that just your eyes stay glued to her. And everybody's got different tastes and everything. But I thought it was funny how my thoughts had not changed at all about her since I first saw this movie. Was when she's like still kind of like got the tousled hair and like no makeup and running around barefoot is when I thought she was the most beautiful. And then later on in the movie, when she's all like dolled up and red lipstick and glimmery and glamoury, I was like, damn, she was hotter like the other way. But that just shows,
I agree, yeah,
yeah,
it actually works best for her that way.
but that just shows like how naturally beautiful she is because like I said, she's running around basically dirty and barefoot and looks amazing. Um,
Mhm.
let's
Yeah,
talk
I
about.
mean, and it looks like just looking oh, sorry,
Oh, you're
but just
fine.
looking through her IMDb, one more thing, it looks like she did, work pretty steadily up until, like, 2009. It's just nothing I just feel like she has been super underrated, and she deserved to be a bigger star than she was, and I hope that it wasn't this movie that tanked it for her, but it might have been.
It could have very well been. Um, well, I was going to say let's talk about her love interest, but let's actually let's reel it back just a hair. Let's talk about Beckmeyer, who is technically, in my eyes, our lead guy here. Um, what did you think of his character? Barry Otto, Professor Beckmeyer, our Australian
Mhm.
werewolf expert, and all around I have no idea because I don't even know what the fuck he's supposed to be doing.
Well, I will say real quick, similar to The Howling 2, to me it is very unclear who the protagonist of this movie is because for part of it it's Jerboa and then the other part of it it's Beckmeyer, but they don't actually interact with each other that much throughout the movie.
Not much at
But
all.
just looking at Professor Beckmeyer on his own, um he he's a really good like driving force for the plot. I'm using big air quotes around the word plot, but I mean he does get things going. He at least helps, go from one thing to the next, and he also is really good at like exposition, so he just like explains a lot of stuff that's happening
I feel like that's what he
that
is.
and it still doesn't fully make sense, but
I feel like that's what he was for this movie was he was just like the exposition guy. He was there because they knew this movie didn't make a lick of fucking sense. So they're like, we'll just make him be the guy that knows everything and explains it to us.
yeah. I will say that strictly as like a professor and a scientist, he's a little unethical because he just decides to just make out with the patient that he's studying in the middle of the examination room. Uh, that who was also a werewolf. I don't know. It's like he's so obsessed with werewolves that he fell in love with one.
I well, I don't know. Let me get to that in a second.
Yeah, well, see,
Yeah,
it's like every time you can't talk about one part of this movie without then branching off into like 10 other plot points of this movie because there's
I
just so much happening.
I wrote it down. I don't know if you can see it right here, but I wrote it down that this is going to be tough to do an episode on because the plot is moving. The plot is moving in every breakneck speed direction possible. That it's hard for us to even break down what's happening. But yeah, I'll jump off. Let's jump off of Beckmeyer, who's played by Barry Otto, which, by the way, is in one of my favorite Marvel superhero movies. We'll get to that in a second. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, let's talk about the other, I guess, quote unquote protagonist. Let's talk about Jerboa's love interest, Donnie Martin.
Yeah, so he is such a lovable idiot. Like he really is just completely oblivious for so much of this movie. It's so funny how he just doesn't. Okay, so to give some context for those of you who haven't seen the movie, he meets Jerboa, and he's like he just sees her sleeping on a bench with no shoes, looking like a feral woman, and he's like, you should be in movies and I'm working on a movie and you're going to be the star of it. And apparently that's how the movie industry works in Australia in the 80s. So shortly after, they sort of fall in love, sort of, and
Very
they end up sleeping together. And after sleeping together, while she is asleep and he is awake, lovingly watching her sleep, he discovers a hairy marsupial pouch on her stomach. And I'm just wondering, first of all, why didn't you notice that before? And then the second part is that upon discovering this, he's just like, huh, okay. And then later, when she's like, I'm having your half human, half marsupial werewolf son that's coming out that lives in this pouch now. The whole time he just reacts to everything like, "Oh, okay."
So you said lovable, like dimwit or whatever. Like, I is he even
Yeah.
that lovable? But it's funny you bring
No,
up.
I was being nice.
It's funny you bring up that he just sees her on this fucking park bench and is like, "Oh, you're beautiful. You've got to be in this movie that I'm working on." I wrote down that he noticed that she was fucking hot from like 3 miles away because he was in his goddamn car
Seriously.
driving by and
Hey,
like slammed on the
he's
brakes.
got 20/20 vision for babes.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't wrong. I'll give him that. Um, but yeah, literally, I wrote down some timelines here. So it's roughly 12 hours after he finds her on the park bench that they have sex, and
Oh my.
yeah, it's roughly 12 hours. And when she's asleep, laying beside him, and he's like like you said, lovingly like checking her out, he starts like literally fiddling with the hair on her stomach. Um, I noticed that the pouch isn't formed yet. It's just like a weird like slit line that's in her stomach, and the pouch
Yeah.
hasn't formed yet. And you're right. He just like it's just like not he's not like twirling her stomach hair, but he's just like playing with it, and it's just like, why is he not thinking this is the weirdest fucking shit ever? Because I'm telling
You
you,
know
man.
what? I think, you know what? He was just progressive for his time. He was super body positive and he was like, "You know what? You might have a little body hair, but I'm cool with it because you're super hot." And so maybe for that reason, he's
Look,
he's a hero in my book.
you can be slicker than a marble down there, or you can look like fucking Afro Samurai down there. I don't care. But when you've got that shit creeping up your fucking stomach, That's where I'm gonna have to fucking throw on the red
Well,
line.
and it's really it's the pouch, that's really just it. Some people are hairier than others, it happens, and it's perfectly normal, and then there's the pouch, though, and that's really the part that I'm wondering why he just kind of glossed over and was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, it's so for people listening that has not seen this movie. So this guy, this Donnie Martin, he works on a movie that's being shot in this city that Jerboa just fucking literally landed in. And the movie I think it's called, was it Shapeshifters Part 8?
Shapeshifters Part 8, and
Okay.
everybody on the crew has these amazing T-shirts, and I really want one of them.
I was thinking of making them for us.
Okay, well, yes, I
Yeah.
want one.
Um, I wrote down in my notes that it's pretty bad that the fake movie within a movie that they are working on looks more fun and better than the actual movie that we're watching.
Yes, it does. And not only the movie that they're working on, but the movie that they go see in the theater called It Came from Uranus. I was like, I want to see that movie. Whatever the hell that was, I want to see
Yes.
2 hours of that instead of this movie that I'm currently stuck in.
Yeah, so it came from Uranus, looks amazing, and the stuff that's in that fake movie within a movie looks like I said, like that even looked better than the actual movie that we're watching.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, Donnie is he I barely even remember him in this movie because he just so doesn't super contribute to the plot. He kind of just becomes Jerboa's arm candy throughout the movie. He's just kind of there to be her love interest, and I don't know. And you know what? Again, maybe that's super progressive because in the 80s it was usually just some random woman that was the love interest that was given no depth or anything. So, I don't know. Maybe they turned the tables. I'm trying to just give this movie the benefit of the doubt, man.
You're trying so hard.
I'm trying.
I would say that maybe they're trying to be progressive and do something new, but then like I want to talk about another character. This guy Philo, who is
Mm,
the head of the werewolf tribe from the village of Flo in Australia. Philo is all right. So he is the stepfather to Jerboa, and as far as we can tell, we don't know if he's also the father slash stepfather of the other females that's in the tribe. I don't know what his relation is to the werewolf nuns, but they're all together. So basically, it's never really comes out and says, but he wants to fuck his stepdaughter. Philo wants to fuck
yeah.
Jerboa, and I guess to me, and maybe it came off different to you. To me, it seems like this isn't the first time. Like maybe it's happened before, and like she was not having it anymore, and that's why the fuck she got out of there. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like that he is very controlling and abusive of all of these werewolf women in his group cult. I don't okay, I even wrote down while I was watching this movie, I was like, what the hell is this random like road warrior group of people? And then I looked up the actor who played Thilo, Max Fairchild, and
He
sure
was in
enough,
the
he
road.
was in Road Warrior.
Yeah. Well, he was actually he was what am I so Mad Max, the original, the first Mad Max is one of my all-time favorite movies. And I know people like the Road Warrior and all the sequels more because it's more post-apocalyptic than Mad Max. But I love Mad Max just because
Mhm.
it's such a fucking like gritty and like heart-ripping movie. But so the
Yeah.
actor that plays this Philo that plays Jerboa's raping stepfather, that's Max Fairchild, and he's in a slew of Australian movies. Like this entire cast is Australian, of course, but yeah, he's I feel like him
Mhm.
and Barry Otto were the two probably biggest names in the whole film. But the thing about Philo is he's obviously an asshole. He's a terrible person. He has either already raped or is trying to continue to rape his stepdaughter Jaboa, who is our lead actress. So, like from the get go, from step one, we hate this motherfucker. We don't like him. But for some weird ass reason, around like halfway, of the third act, they try to redeem him and make him likable and try to make him like almost
Mm.
like the hero. And I'm just like, I don't understand that choice whatsoever. If anything,
Yeah,
I don't get it.
that it's just too that's a lot of heavy lifting for one character to do. It's like you can't maybe in the 80s it was different, but I mean, I feel like especially now, you can't introduce a character as a serial rapist and then have them redeemed an hour and a half later with
Right.
without some really intense heavy lifting. And even after that, I don't know, man. So yeah, that was a really weird shift for me. And when that happens in the movie, that's kind of when that wasn't what triggered it, but like that happens during the time in the movie when my eyes started to glaze over a little bit and I started to be like, there's what is happening anymore.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like it's so many weird choices, but I like how I don't know if it was meant to. But we have. I mean, we're still going through fucking characters in this movie. Like Jesus Christ. We still got to talk about was it Olga, the Russian werewolf ballerina.
Yes.
So
Yes.
not to like jump ahead, but we've got Philo, this leader of the wolf cult, who's trying to fuck his stepdaughter, who's first after his stepdaughter, but then finds this Russian ballerina werewolf, and they fall in love with each other, and it creates a completely separate and new plot point that's brought in with. So we've got Australian werewolf tribe marsupials, we've got Russian ballerina. Well, she's not a marsupial. She's just like a regular werewolf. Um,
Just regular, yeah.
and you got the government people that's after them. You've got Barry Otto, as a professor, is trying to, I don't know, I guess protect them. You've got Jerboa that's now pregnant with a chicken nugget at first. Um, that's something I want to, let's talk about this real quick. So Jerboa gets pregnant, right? So she meets Donnie Martin while she's on a park bench. He tells her that she's great for this movie that he's working on, Shapeshifters Part 8. He brings her on as an actress, where she meets the director of this movie that looks like a Dollar Tree version of Alfred Hitchcock. Um, which,
Yes.
which that actor, by the way, is in also in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Oh,
Uh,
sweet.
yeah, so she just blindly is like, okay, we got this bitch from a tribe and deep in the heart of Australia that's running around barefoot, but now all of a sudden she's an actress in this fucking horror movie. Um, 12 hours later, her and Donnie are fucking, and then another about 8 hours later, they have a wrap party for the movie where there's a costume party, and her and Donnie, I guess, fuck again behind the stage of this room, where she runs out and gets hit by a car off camera, and they take her to the hospital where the doctors proclaim that she's fucking pregnant. Okay, so are you with me so far?
I'm okay. I just wanted to pop in real quick and say if you're listening to this and you haven't seen this movie and you are confused, I want you to know that we've seen the movie and we are also very confused.
I've seen the movie multiple times and I'm still confused.
I just, technically I have too, and I'm still very confused.
So, if the movie wasn't already a mind fuck, let me throw this out at you. So far, I've brought us up to speed. She was hit by the car. She's in the hospital. Uh, uh, Beckmeyer gets notified of this werewolf bitch that's in the hospital. He shows up, realizes that she's a marsupial werewolf, and that she's pregnant. Now, I wanna throw this question out to you. Okay, the doctors and professors do say that since she's a half breed human marsupial werewolf, that her metabolism is different, right? But
Mhm.
I guess that's them trying to explain how she's pregnant. But I throw this out to you. It's only been about 12 hours since she first had sex with Donnie. Is the baby his or is it Philo's?
That is a thought. That is a very that's good. So I mean that kind of leads back to the question you asked earlier, is Thilo a repeat abuser of her, or is this
Right,
something new?
exactly.
And now that you've mentioned all of this, I'm going to change what I said originally, and I'm going to say that I think that he was very controlling and probably very like physically and verbally abusive to her, but had not yet been sexually abusive to her, but was very making it very known that he intended to be, because in that first scene where she's on the bus and somebody asks like what happened to her or something, she just very like casually is just like, oh, my stepfather's trying to rape me and he's a werewolf, so
It's actually it's a priest that's on that's on the bus that's asked to ask her.
yeah, so I mean, I don't I mean, I do think that the whole bit about metabolism was trying to somehow explain, although I don't know how a fast metabolism would mean that your baby would grow faster, but I guess I don't know. I'm not, I'm not a scientist. If anyone is listening that is a biologist, please let us know
If
your
you're a
take on the
biologist of
science behind
Australian
this
werewolf
movie.
marsupials that can tell us how their anatomy works, please tell us.
Please tell me.
I I'm gonna make my stance and say, I think Thilo is actually the father, and here is why. Not only because of the timeline, but and this is spoilers and this is jumping ahead, but fuck it, this movie's a mess anyway. It doesn't matter. Um, we learn that Thilo and his tribe is of a certain breed of marsupial werewolves. So we keep saying the word werewolf when in fact they're not actually werewolves. They're like uh, so the animal that they represent is the Tasmanian tiger, which is a now extinct
Hmm.
animal from Australia. And those animals had these certain stripes on their back end. So Thilo says later on that the shapeshifter god or whatever it is who passed on his powers to this tribe, he was a Tasmanian tiger. All right. So that would make, I guess, Jerboa one, but we never see her stripe,
Hmm.
right? But when she gives birth to the baby has the Tasmanian tiger stripes, the same as Thylos that we do see later.
So everything you're saying makes perfect sense. The problem is that the movie does not make sense. So I truly think, while that logically, with the information that was presented to us, makes the most sense, I truly think that the intent of the movie was that Donnie fathered this werewolf baby, and they tried to just throw in a line about metabolism to explain why it's growing so freakishly fast. um I don't know.
I mean, I guess. Speaking of which, I want to roll back to something real quick, and you're gonna be like, "Of course, you want to roll back to this." The very first time they have sex,
Of
did
course.
did was there like a heat wave in that room with no AC?
There's so much sweat. There's too much
There's
sweat.
so much
It's
fucking
everybody's so
sweat.
sweaty.
It's disgusting.
I just was watching this thing like, is that supposed to be it's gotta smell so bad in that room. They've gotta be so smelly, and they're cuddling afterwards. I was like, no sane person covered in sweat to the point where it's like dripping off of your nose is gonna be like, let's cuddle. That's disgusting. So yeah, that was the least sexiest thing I've ever seen.
Absolutely. I'm a very like visual like person. In other words, like I don't know how to explain how my brain works, but like somebody will tell me something and all of a sudden when they're telling me whatever, like whether it be a story or a scenario or anything, I automatically visualize it and like it plays out in my fucking head.
Right.
And I'm also the same way when I'm watching a movie. If there was like an abundance of something happening in a scene, like I'll like almost like develop a sense of what's happening in that scene. And I'm not gonna and what I mean
Mhm.
by that is when I was watching this scene where they're just literally just dripping with sweat, I started getting like the hint
Ugh.
of the old locker room in my fucking high school gym.
Oh, Oh,
I'm just like,
and
that's
if
gotta
you
smell like
okay,
that in
I
here.
also I think that I think that you went to the same high school that I briefly went to a few years later, and I can confirm that the locker room was still disgusting.
See, I don't know what the ladies' locker room smelled like, but the guys, it was just, and I'm sure
Oh,
every
no,
locker.
no, no, I'm telling you that you could smell the boys' locker room from outside of it.
I'm sure
And
every. I'm sure
that's
everyone.
how that whole scene smells. That's how
Yeah,
that whole
and
room
that's my point.
smelled
I
afterwards.
for a brief minute and a half, I smelt my old fucking gym locker room while watching Howling 3, if that tells our audience any fucking thing about this movie.
Disgusting. Yeah, there are definitely some choices made with that, and it was very very unsexy. Um, yeah, it's so funny to watch this movie right after The Howling 2, which is so horny. Like there's just so much there's a werewolf orgy, there's like 3 werewolf threesomes, there's like so many boobs, there's just over and over and over. And it's like, yeah, they're all covered in hair, but it's still shot in a way that's like I don't want to say that it's super sexy, but it's better than just this sweat dripping
Yes.
like swamp room that they've created for them.
Um, we were talking about like the jarring editing and shit earlier. I also want to bring up like just some of the camera choices. Like there was a couple shots where they used like a fucking like weird ass fisheye lens, and
Yeah.
it's like even that was jarring as shit. This movie should not be called Howling 3: The Marsupials. It should be called Howling 3: Jarring as fuck, because that's what this movie is.
Yeah. I did have one more character that I wanted to touch on briefly just because he has one of the funniest lines I heard in this whole movie. And that was the character of Kendi, which is the aboriginal man with the big beard that they
Bushman,
meet at the
yeah,
farm. And he's amazing. And so I don't long story short, he does some sort of ritual to like resurrect the spirit of a wolf to like attack the
yep.
military people that are coming for the werewolf baby, and he dies in the process. And so as he's dying, it's what could be, maybe a poignant scene of this lovable character dying, and Jerboa runs over to him and is like, I don't remember exactly what she says, but she says something to the effect of like, you're gonna become a rainbow and you're gonna be a waterfall when you die. It's gonna be so beautiful. And he goes, no way, I'm just going to die. And
And he
then he
does.
keels over. It's the funniest thing. I love it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, okay, yeah. And that it's like little moments like that where you're like, there's the intentional comedy. There it is. I see it. And they actually nailed it in that particular scene.
He honestly is my favorite part of the entire movie. I'm glad we're finally getting around to
He's
him.
fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. He reminds me of the Aboriginal guy from Crocodile Dundee, and I don't think it's the same guy, but he's absolutely my favorite character and part of this entire movie, which really says something when he's only in the movie for probably a total of like 12 minutes. Um,
Oh yeah, he's hardly in it. Very
yeah,
underutilized.
but I do want to bring up to people listening this specific part with this character. So, like Katie said, he prays to like this shape shifting god to turn him into a werewolf, so he can attack these hunters and people that's hunting them down in the Australian outback. So he turns into like this werewolf that looks actually pretty cool because it's like caked in like white Aboriginal like tribal makeup with like red
Mhm.
markings and shit on its face, and it's like tearing these werewolf dudes up. And then he gets killed, or he gets fatally wounded. Where Jaboa tells him he's going to be a rainbow, and he's like, "No, I'm not. I'm going to die." And he just fucking dies. Well, then they give him the Darth Vader funeral, where they cover him in sticks
Yes, they do.
and set him on fire and shit, and then they just walk away, leaving this fucking corpse to burn. But then, like what, 10 minutes later, the hunters and the military guys they show up and they find his burnt corpse. That's just a skeleton now, It's a burnt, blackened skeleton, but the head is of a wolf skull. And out of fucking nowhere, the skeleton sits up and starts attacking these fucking guys. And it's like the coolest fucking moment in the entire goddamn movie. And I wrote down this 10 minutes makes the movie worth it.
It's so great. Yeah, I definitely recommend, um, if you're gonna if you're gonna watch this movie, fucking commit, stick to it, just watch the
Yeah.
whole thing. Your eyes are gonna start glazing over and you're gonna be confused. Just let the confusion wash over you, just so you can get to that scene because it's a lot of fun.
Um, so let's talk about real quick Olga, the Russian ballerina werewolf. I love saying that Russian ballerina werewolf because
The
that
Russian
could be its own
werewolf
fucking movie
ballerina.
too. But I like how like she's got like this. I don't know if it's like a shared like ESP with Philo that they know each other exist and they want to mate or whatever. But I love how the guy that she's with, like when they're at the theater, like she's behind stage getting ready to go out to perform her dance. They're backstage talking,
Yeah,
and he draws like this most like poorly drawn caricature of Philo and holds it up to her, and she just gets horny as fuck all off this like
she's loving it.
and she's making like these like weird ass like rawr, rawr sounds like while she's horny as
It's
shit.
so weird.
This, folks,
So I
this
was
is a
so
train wreck.
confused by that. I feel like, yeah, so I think that's like her weird psychic friend and was like, I'm gonna
It was also a
draw
werewolf.
the man that you're trying. Oh, that part is so just yada yada yada, and they don't explain it at all. But yeah, you're right. She's got this like psychic connection to Thylo for some reason, and decides that that's the man that she's going to seek out. And then she has this freaking great transformation scene in the middle of the Sydney Opera House while performing a ballet.
And it's so comical because as she's twirling, spinning, it's a different phase of transformation. And had that been shot
hmm
right and the makeup been better, that could have been such a great transformation. But it just turned out just to be goofy as fuck.
Yeah, it's pretty wacky. It could have been cool though. I agree. I think it was a cool idea. I like the idea of like she's spinning around so fast that, the other people on stage aren't really noticing that she's changing, but the audience can see that every time she spins back around, she's a little bit hairier, she's a little
Right.
bit more werewolf like. But yeah, then once she fully transforms, it's a little underwhelming.
So, well, like again, it's really hard to streamline what this movie is about and try to tell you people listening everything because, like, again, it's all over the fucking map. But now let's circle back around to Jorboa being pregnant. So the werewolf nuns finally kidnap her and take her back to Australia or back to the village of Flo, where she proceeds to as soon as she gets there, run away again to a barn to give birth to her baby. And this is my like I laugh so hard every time I watch this, just because she gives birth to a fucking chicken nugget. Like her baby werewolf, okay, is literally the size of a fucking chicken nugget, and it's hairless, and it just looks like it's the weirdest looking thing. It just boggles my mind the choice they made for making the baby look like that and be that fucking small. Like it should just popped out like the
Yeah.
normal like a normal baby size. But anyway, like this
So
little bitty
I
chicken
think
nugget.
the intention behind the chicken nugget, I think, was to play up the whole marsupial thing because, like, I guess when like oops, sorry, bumped the mic. Hello, professional podcaster. So I think when I got excited about the birthing scene, Matt, but when like a kangaroo or something has a baby, I think what happens is that not to get too inside baseball when it comes to biology, but I believe the tiny, not fully formed baby comes out, where it normally comes out from, and then it crawls up into the pouch and it hangs out in the pouch, and that's where it continues to grow into its full size.
I get that, but also, come on,
But also,
like, did we need to see Jerboa lay down on her back and spread her legs to reveal her werewolf hairy cooch just to see this fucking chicken nugget
no.
crawl out?
In fact, I wrote down that this scene was entirely too erotic. It was, like, uncomfortably erotic. This birth
Yeah.
scene in the barn where a tiny chicken nugget baby crawls out of her cooch and right up into that little hairy pouch on
Oh,
her
yeah.
stomach, and it just and she's covered in sweat again, and it's just
Yeah.
the way it was shot, it's really like they thought it was, like, sexy, and I was like, "There's nothing sexy going on here."
At
Um,
all.
I feel like that is the scene that tends to stick out in people's memories of those who have braved this movie. Um, and I don't know if now is the right time to give a fun fact about the production of that scene, but
Please
it's
do.
possible that Philippe Mora may have killed a mouse while making this scene.
What?
Inconclusive. Okay, so they tried putting a so I've heard two accounts. The one I've heard is that they tried to put a mouse in a little rubber costume to make it
Oh
look
my
like a little
god.
werewolf fetus. And they were going to try to have the mouse crawl into the pouch. And one account that I've heard is that the mouse was simply uncooperative and it had to be filmed backwards in order to make it look like it was actually entering the pouch. But then another thing that I read said that it was a petrified mouse that was already dead that I guess they had like on a string or something. And then another thing I read definitely implied that the mouse was killed in the making of this movie.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know that's a lot to take in. I know that's a lot to take in. Yeah, I think he did say in a bit of a cheeky way that that was the first and last time he would ever direct a mouse.
I just I'm at a loss for words because just knowing that scene and how this scene looks and how this scene plays out, there's no reason. Who even had the idea of putting a fucking mouse inside of a little
In
rubber
a little
cage?
costume.
That's so weird, man.
Oh, they also tried to apparently put makeup on, like, an actual human baby for when her baby gets a little bit older, and
Right.
that didn't work either, so it's just this puppet monstrosity from hell.
I do like when Donnie shows up at the at the village or whatever, and she's like there with his baby in the pouch. His reaction is literally just, he just smiling. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
how are you just not like, I get me the fuck out of here? This girl that I just had sex with just gave birth to this slimy, hairy
yeah.
baby hanging out in her hairy cooch pouch. Oh my god,
I that baby puppet is an absolute nightmare,
nightmare
and
fuel.
if anyone, it is nightmare fuel. So much I would say that it's worse than the animatronic baby in Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2, which if anyone has not seen that, I've watched it for you. But please do yourself a favor and go right now to Google or whatever search engine that you use and please look up Breaking Dawn animatronic baby and just it's nightmare fuel. But anyway, that was a little side note, but it reminded me of that.
I want to jump on this real quick since we're talking about the werewolf baby. We just talked about Kendi, the Bushman, who turns into the cool werewolf travel guy, then turns into a fucking werewolf
Yes.
skeleton. Philo, in his weird moment of redemption, prays to the what do they call it? The Phantom werewolf god.
I think so.
But
Yeah.
he literally prays to this to what they call the Phantom to make him the big one. And then, folks, the next thing you know, Philo turns in like we don't see his body, we just see his head. but Thilo turns into like a fucking like King Kong sized werewolf and like shoves his head into the tent of these military guys that's hunting them down and kills one, which sets off a fucking rocket launcher, which blows up the other one. And the most coolest and craziest, probably the second coolest scene in the entire fucking movie. But it's also just another like
It's
Wolfzilla,
pretty
what the
awesome.
fuck just happened thing. Um, I want to throw out that the president and the military and government wants these werewolves eradicated. And so at one point they said, send in the Omega team. And then the Omega team just ends up being two dudes and like some weird fatigues that's hunting werewolves that gets taken out by fucking Thilo as Wolfzilla. So
I
I,
guess the A team was too busy.
yeah, if you, nobody could find them. Let me do a quick roster, okay? Real quick before we move on to final moments. So we've got. I feel like I'm doing Joe Bob's drive-in totals here. We've got one werewolf
Yeah,
baby.
and it's just characters.
One werewolf baby, one werewolf with pouch, Tasmanian tiger werewolf, three werewolf nuns, a werewolf Russian ballerina, a wolfzilla, an omega team, a homophobic president, which we haven't technically talked about yet. Is there anything else that I'm leaving out?
Yeah, like I guess the Alfred Hitchcock wannabe horror director who's briefly in it but is very fun.
Uh,
And that's about it.
so I feel like we're doing like a circle right back to where we were at the very beginning. Just kind of cool way to close it. Oh, I guess a decent way to close off this fucking batshit movie. The president. So we're back to him again, Mr. President. We don't know if he's the president of the United States, president of Australia, or just whatever. Um, but in all the what the fuckery of this movie, so our Russian ballerina is in love with Philo, the raping stepfather of Jerboa, and then Philo sacrifices himself, turning into Wolfzilla to kill the Omega team that was sent to kill them. So after his death, Olga, the Russian werewolf ballerina, then falls in love with our other protagonist, which is Beckmeyer. And then so they hook up and they decide to continue living together in the bush of Australia, where then she becomes pregnant with Beckmeyer's baby, and they have a daughter. So meanwhile, Beckmeyer and Russian ballerina have daughter, and they're raising it alongside Jerboa and Donnie with their son, living happily ever after in the bush of Australia. And then we flash forward to a handful of years later, where now Jerboa and Donnie have moved back to Sydney to live under new identities as filmmakers. And Beckmeyer's buddy shows up and was like, "Hey, I'm so glad I found you. Since you've been gone, there was a fucking werewolf war that broke out between humans and werewolves, and evidently it was just like a bloodbath for numerous years. And finally, one day, the president realized the werewolves aren't so bad. We should all live happily ever after." And then Beckmeyer's like, "Oh, okay." And they just fucking pack their bags, move back to Sydney, and where at the end we see them living in a fucking mansion, watching TV, where we see Jerboa on TV accepting an award for a movie that she was in, and the lights from all the cameras and the paparazzi make her transform as a werewolf on live television. Thus concludes the Howling III, the Marsupials. Holy
I
shit.
cannot believe that there is that much exposition in just a single conversation. I'd fucking forgotten completely that the werewolf human war of Australia happened.
I didn't
And it's like, where's that movie? I want
Was
to see
that
that
even
movie.
Australia? Because I almost took it as like a fucking world, like a WW
A worldwide werewolf
Wolf
war.
War. Yeah. I
So
don't know, dude.
that's incredible, and I'd completely forgotten about my favorite thing though is, I don't like to get too I don't like to get too nitpicky about like real world logic when it comes to movies. I know that, in a
Right,
movie you kind of got to bend things a little bit in order to get the plot going. But I cannot let go the fact that Jerboa is now a famous actor, famous enough that she's being given an award.
right.
And yet somehow this is the first time she has ever been exposed to the
Camera.
flashing lights of the paparazzi. It's like, how is this the first time that she has accidentally been triggered to do, which that's another thing we didn't fully cover, is that the flashing lights trigger
Right.
their transformation.
Yeah, well, I
So
mean,
that was just, I don't know why.
it's easy for us to leave shit out like that when it's just so fucking much to cover. Um, yeah,
I mean, I feel like there's even more that we haven't even said because I don't even know. I don't even remember because it's just so much.
again, like it's funny because I said on the last episode that the whole point of our show is not to do like a technical review of the movie. It's more of us just talking about the movie. But I feel like this might be the our one and only movie where we try to talk about everything that happened just because it sounds like something you would make up. Like everything that's come out of our mouths on this episode sounds so fucking made up that it's impossible for us not
Yeah.
to just talk about all of it.
Yeah, it's a little all over the place. And one thing I did want to say is that, if you if you're listening to this and you've made it this far and you have not seen the movie and you still want to, it is, as of the time of us recording this, it is available on Amazon Prime Video. So if you have an Amazon Prime account, or just get the login info from a friend or a relative, you don't have to give them your money. You could
Yeah,
just watch it,
probably
and
I'll
it's
give you my
there.
login.
And yeah, you know what, we'll give you our login.
All right, so before we move on to all of our last categories, I'm just going to end the final talks of what the movie's about with this. When Beckmeyer decides to stay in the outback with his new Russian werewolf bride, his buddy, the other professor, goes back to Mr. President to tell him, Beckmeyer is staying staying there. He's now shacked up with a werewolf. To which the president replies, "Is it female?" And the guy says, "Yes." And the president says, "Well, thank God for that."
I love that's just actually, you know what? That might be the most realistic part of this whole movie, because I feel like a homophobe would rather that you are sleeping with a werewolf than somebody of the same gender as you.
You know what? It, you're absolutely right because I'm sitting here just thinking of the world now and how if werewolves actually existed, that would probably still be the case with a lot of fucking assholes.
Yes, I'm absolutely sure of it. So, while that is absolutely hilarious to hear in a line, it's weirdly and unfortunately the most believable part.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you know what? We just spent exactly an hour and a half breaking the fucking movie down. Um, let's move on. I do want to give a shout out real quick. So I talked about Barry Otto, who played Professor Beckmeyer earlier. How he's in one of my all-time favorite Marvel movies. He's actually in my favorite Punisher movie, which is the original 1989 Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie. He plays
Oh, wow, yeah.
he plays
That's right, I thought I saw that on his IMDb.
yeah, he plays the sidekick, which in this movie, I forget what his name was in the Dolph Lundgren movie, but his character is technically the character of Microchip, which is a character from the comic books and stuff. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because I actually do love him in that movie. Um,
That is so cool.
Also, I want to bring up this. I know I didn't bring it up on our last episode when we talked about Howling 2, but I'll bring it up now. So the executive producer of not only this movie, Stephen Lane, he was the executive producer of Howling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. and then he skipped part 7 and then returned to be the executive producer for part 8, and was also the executive producer for Lawnmower Man 1 and 2 and Dean Koontz's Dean Koontz's Phantoms. So,
Wow.
but that's kind of it. That's like the only movies this guy's the executive producer of, and so it was such a weird lineup.
Yeah, he had a thing and he just stuck with it, and good on him.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I mean we've already talked a little bit about Philippe Mora, and shoot, I can't remember the name of the writer. I'm going to look it up. I'm bad podcaster. Um but I wanted to just say that once again, similar to part 2, that the original writer of the novels, which was Gary Brandner, who wrote the Howling novels, not only did he assist in the writing of the Howling 2 movie, but he also assisted in writing the script for the Howling 3, even though, once again, it has nothing to do with the book, the Howling 3. So it seems like he and Philippe Mora are just this weird tag team where, for some reason, the guy is just like, yeah, you can adapt my books into movies that have nothing to do with the book at all.
Yeah, well, I wasn't for sure if Bradner had actually written this one because I know in the credits it says based on his books, but I wasn't for sure if he actually lent a hand again this time to the script, which I don't know. It blows my fucking mind either way if he did or he didn't.
Yeah, it's not. So I also noticed that he wasn't in the credits, but when you look up the movie, like on Wikipedia and IMDb, he's credited as a co-writer. So
Wow.
I don't know if that's just because he wrote the book that happened to have, I don't know, but he definitely had his hand in it. And in it, another fun fact that I read was that Philippe Mora was a little upset with how the studio treated the Howling 2 after he like handed it off to them. Apparently they added in a bunch of shots of boobs that he did not want, and I'm
Bullshit.
like, I don't know if that's true, but but apparently he wasn't a fan of that, and so I think part of this movie, he claims that part of this of the Howling 3 was kind of poking fun at the film industry. But again, I don't know if I buy that completely. I feel
Uh,
like it just wasn't. It's like, I just feel like it's really easy to say after the fact that, like, oh, it was satire, or oh, it was a comedy, when it's like, oh, maybe you just didn't make a great movie, but that's okay.
so I'm going to bring up exactly what I said on last episode, where I said it about part 2, but it makes even more sense for part 3. That this movie literally comes off as a movie that looks and feels like it had a non-English speaking director with an English or a English speaking uh,
Yes.
cast because of all the weirdness and shit. And then, if you remember, I actually compared Howling 2 a little bit to Troll 2, but I feel like you could
Mm-hmm.
do that comparison even more so with Howling 3, just in its tone and its overall weirdness. And also, like, Troll 2, you've got your famous Nilbog, the town of Nilbog, which is goblin spelled backwards. And in this movie, you've got the village of Flo, which is wolf spelled backwards. So,
Mm-hmm.
we had talked about how it'd be really great to do, like once a year, do like an annual, like Howling 2 get together where everybody gets together and watches the movie. How great would a Troll 2 Howling 3 marathon be?
Oh, that would be one hell of a double feature.
Like,
I think you definitely want to do the Howling 3 first, and then lead into, because I mean the Troll 2's got to be the main event, right?
oh, absolutely.
But I think having those two back to back would be really fun. I also could see just doing a double feature of the Howling 2 and the Howling 3, with
True.
a bunch of people and just popcorn and beer, and just everybody yells at the screen, like, that would be a blast. This is similar to the second movie. This is definitely a movie that you want to watch with other people. Unlike how you and I watched it, which was completely alone and in silence. So
So yeah, we talked a lot about Felipe Mora on last episode. So there's not a lot of ground to cover talking about him. However, I do want to bring up, like I said, I usually leave the detective work to you to look up shit and find out some shit. Um, However, I did look up one fucking thing because I was like, well, we got to talk about Felipe Mora again. So I was like, I got to find something new. What can I dig up? And oh my fucking god! So I don't know what's happening. I don't know what stages it's in. I don't know if it's even still happening. But as of 2017, Felipe Mora was working on a movie. Okay? He was working on a movie starring Max Fairchild, who played Thilo. And the title of this fucking movie is The Growling.
Yep. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I found that earlier and I meant to write it down and then I forgot. So I saw that on IMDb and I was like, "Wait, what the Growling starring Max Fairchild directed by Philippe Mora?" So I don't know. Again, there hasn't been an update since 2017, so I have no
Right.
idea what's happening with that. But how
I hope to
great would it
God that
be if Philippe Mora in 2021 is like, all right, I'm making my comeback. We're doing a call back to the
with
Howling
The
2,
Growling.
Howling 3, and we're going to call it the Growling.
I just it's got to be right. It's got to be uh, a riff on Howling. It's got to be. There's no way around it.
It absolutely there's no there's it would be too much of a coincidence for him to be directing a movie called The Growling that is starring somebody that was in the Howling 3.
Right.
There's just I don't know. But
Felipe,
yeah, I
if you're
mean,
out there
so I
listening,
don't
make it happen. Bring it. Bring it.
Oh,
Please.
make it happen. I
Please.
know we've been ragging on your movie, but it's actually very fun and we would basically the way I see it is that if the movie was completely boring, like we wouldn't be talking about a movie that's not worth talking about, you
Right.
know? So I think that's where the positives come in, and you mentioned, we don't want to spend each episode just ragging on the movie, but all of the things that we're ragging on is it's actually what makes it so charming and it's what makes these things stick in our memories
Oh
and
yeah.
it's why we keep going back and watching them again. There's this weird fine line between bad and good, and sometimes you can go so far into the bad side that it just loops back around and it becomes good again, because mediocre movies, they just come and go and everybody forgets about them, but
Right.
we're still talking about the Howling 3 marsupials like
Oh my
30
god.
years
Yeah.
later.
That's why I really wanted to our first two episodes to be this double feature. It's literally because like I grew up with these movies. It's not only like I said last episode, is it like one of the only werewolf franchises, but it's my favorite werewolf franchise. And as much as like this movie just fucking blows my mind, and not in a good way, and it just is complete what the fuck. You got to remember what I said at the beginning. Is this is like probably like the thousandth time I've watched this movie. I do keep coming back because it is so
Hmm.
batshit crazy. And again, you'll probably hear me say this a million times if you continue listening to our show, but it's just fun, and I love fun movies. And I feel like that's something that's
Yeah.
missing in movies nowadays. Is horror movies are a dime a dozen now. I mean, anybody with even like a half decent phone is out here fucking shooting a movie, and I'm all for that. I think that's amazing, but I think the heart and soul of what made movies fun has been kind of lost. And like you said, we've been ragging on this movie, but it's not so much that we're ragging on it and making fun of it. It's just that it is a terrible movie, but it's a fun terrible movie. And you know,
Yeah.
it brings me to the point like there's so many filmmakers, myself included. Like I'm not gonna like pretend that I don't make some terrible stuff, but sometimes like I try to inject fun into my terrible stuff. And a lot of people will try to emulate the '80s with their movies. A lot of movies are set in the '80s. They try to make it look like '80s. And while that's awesome and that's fun to try to make and emulate the '80s, the reason it never quite works is because I think people are forgetting the fun aspect of it. So that's what I say to you.
Hmm.
Don't go into Howling 3 expecting a masterpiece because it is far beyond a masterpiece. It is a dumpster fire of a movie, but fuck, it is fun. Again, where else are you going to find
Yeah.
werewolf nuns? Uh, you know, hot chicks with a kangaroo pouch with her werewolf baby in it, Russian ballerina werewolves. You know, it's a fun fucking movie. It's completely batshit crazy,
Mhm.
but it's a blast.
Yeah, I really like what you said about, the fun of a movie, and a lot of horror movies of recent times missing the fun aspect. And I think kind of what we're seeing happening is that on one hand, horror is becoming more of a generally accepted genre. It's not a dirty word anymore. It's
Right.
not
Not the
skeezy
bastard
and
style.
scummy to the general public anymore. And I think we're seeing a lot of more serious, maybe more kind of art housey type directors dabbling in horror and using it to really beautifully like explore these themes of grief and trauma and all of these things. And I love horror movies like that, like like Hereditary and just movies like that are really just going there.
Right.
But I really don't want us to lose the fun.
Mhm.
I think there's plenty of room for everyone, and I want to see people do something totally batshit insane. Like that's why I'm really excited about this movie Porno that I was talking about earlier. Again, I haven't seen it yet, so I can't speak to it exactly, but just something about that, like that's such a ridiculous premise, and
Right.
it just sounds fun. And so I think, yeah, I mean, I would say to anybody that's trying to make movies, trying to make horror movies, don't forget the fun, because that's what we're coming to see most of the time, is to have a good time. So
Yeah.
yeah, you can, I mentioned this in the last episode, just about how forgiving and accepting the horror community is if we can tell that you had passion and that you enjoyed making it. So don't get so bogged down in like, oh, this is going to be silly or cheesy or people aren't going to like it, cuz just have fun, just make it fun. If it sucks, make it fun and we'll love it.
Yeah, you know what? And the funny thing is, and this is the only advice I would give: if, don't try to make your movie fun. Don't try, but just have fun. If you are having fun making it,
Yes, that's key.
that is going to come through. But there's a lot of people who try to make the movie fun, and it just comes off just bad and forced, and
Yeah.
yeah, just have fun with it. And I will tip my
Mhm.
hat to Felipe Mora. I think, no matter what he might say now, dead mice and werewolf suits to the side. I think there was fun had making this movie and Howling 2. And even though, like I said, I shit all over
Yeah.
the movie, I still have fun watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I would still rather watch this movie than a lot of the boring and sad movies that get nominated for Oscars every year. Hot take. I don't know, maybe
Absolutely.
that's not a hot take, but I but real quick, kind of before we give our final thoughts here, I did want to talk about just kind of some of the special effects
Yeah.
in this movie, and kind of what your take on a lot of that is, because so with this movie being PG-13, there is a lot less gore. So we don't get a lot of like gore effects, but we
Right.
do get some interesting werewolf effects, and both real and imagined and movie within a movie effects. But yeah, what did you think about the effects here?
Okay, so the actual werewolves and the actual movie that we're watching, the you know, I feel like that werewolf makeup is terrible. Um, Everything like
Hmm.
werewolf nuns look like store bought prosthetics that were just slapped on the face. Um, the the only good werewolves look like dog mask. Uh, they're just not very good. However, I find it mind boggling that the two movies within the movie that Donnie and Jerboa are working on, which is Shapeshifters Part 8, the werewolves that's on that movie, which are literally supposed to be people in makeup, look fucking cool as shit. And then the
Yeah.
werewolf in the movie that they go see in the theater, which is called It Came from Uranus, which looks like a fucking trauma movie, even though it's cartoony and over the top, it's so fucking cool looking. And those effects are cool. So I don't understand the thought process that they were going with doing that, but yeah, we talked about Howling 2 being hit and miss with the makeup, but this movie was more way more miss than it was hit for sure.
Yeah, I think the I thought that within the actual movie, not the movies within a movie, but within the actual movie, the werewolves looked the best when they were like mid transition. So, like,
Yeah,
I feel like I don't recall Jerboa ever actually going full, like, I'm a wolf now. And I think that was a good thing. Like I think that looked good, where it's like she's got the fangs and the eyes and a little bit of like hair popping up everywhere, and it's like she's changed and she's monstrous. But like to me, that looks a lot better than just like a rubber mask
yeah,
shoved on somebody's face. Um, I thought the movie within a movie, that it came from Uranus. So Mora said that that was his favorite scene to shoot, and you can tell. I mean, it's so goofy, it's so fun, and they've
yeah.
got these great like prosthetics on this guy's face, and it's like bubbling and contorting, and it looks really good. Like I was actually surprised.
It looks like a living cartoon. It's so cool.
Yeah, it does. It looks just like a living cartoon, and I'm with you. I'm surprised that it seems like they put all their time and effort into like that, and then when it was
Yep.
time towards the end to have actual full on werewolves, it was just kind of a mess.
I do know that the only two effects guys that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there's always a lot of more helping hands, but there's Bob McCarran, who of course worked on Road Warrior and another Australian classic called Razorback. He also worked on Queen of the Dam, and then
Oh wow.
yeah, and then I think it was Nick Dorning was the other effects artist, which also Razorback, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Queen of the Damned, and most recent credits would be Ghost Rider and I Frankenstein. So you know,
Oh wow.
yeah, these people are they'll
So you saying Razorback just triggered a memory of something that I read, a fun fact. So isn't Razorback about like a giant boar
Warthog.
that like
Yeah,
kills everybody? It's like a monster boar warthog. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
So when Thylo becomes like Mondo Wolf and they
yeah,
have the head come through the tent,
yes.
apparently that head is the head from Razorback.
I'm glad you brought that up. I meant to bring that up. It is 100% the head of Razorback, and if you pause it, you can even tell that it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's actually why I didn't like. I said it was cool that Thaler turns into the Wolfzilla, but I didn't talk about that it looked cool because it's fucking Razorback. They literally just borrowed the same
Yeah, it's cool
effect.
in theory.
All right. Well, before we close this out, I do want to bring up something since we're on the effects, the effects of the movie. I said on last episode how one of my all time favorite effects artists, Steve Johnson, worked on the effects of a Howling Part Two, and I said that would not be the last time that he would do the effects, and of course he did not do the effects on Howling 3 because if he did, they would be fucking awesome. But I do want to bring up that Steve Johnson did return to do the effects in Howling Part 4, the original Nightmare, and then in one of my all-time favorites, Howling 6, The Freaks. Of course, we're not going to go over those movies anytime in the near future. I would like to maybe do maybe by the end of next year, like a fun maybe live podcast where me and Katie talk about Howling 4 and 6 as like a double feature type of thing. Um, but I,
Love it.
I'm just telling you folks right now. We ragged about Howling 3. I still say it's fun. Go check it out. We had a lot of fun with Howling 2. We told you to go check it out. But in the meantime, I would say that have yourself maybe like a quadruple feature if that's what it's called. Definitely check out Howling 6, The Freaks. It's got some fucking amazing effects work from Steve Johnson. It's the probably one of the coolest storylines when it comes to a Howling sequel. And Howling 4 isn't that great. Howling 4 is technically a reboot of the first movie, and is more about the book.
Oh,
Yeah, actually, Howling 4, the original Nightmare, is based more on Bradner's book. However,
okay.
it's got the coolest fucking werewolf it's got my probably like my third favorite werewolf transformation scene, which also happens to be my all time favorite melting effect scene. So
Okay, well now I have to watch
Yes, now you
this.
gotta check it out. So, folks, that's my little quick review. Go watch Howling 2, 3, 4, and well, and 6. Check out 5 also, which I think Steve Johnson might have actually. I don't know if he did all the effects for 5. I think the same werewolf costume that was used in 4 was used in 5, but that's it. But technically, go check out the entire
Hmm.
franchise. They're not great, but they're fun. Turn your brain off, pop some popcorn, crack open a beer, and have fun with the Howling franchise for sure.
Yeah, fun is, it's been the word of the day, of the night. And I think, yeah, I definitely think this movie is a mess in a lot of ways. It's another movie where you kind of, like I kind of said earlier, you kind of just got to let it wash over you, and don't try to get too bogged down in connecting the dots between the plot points because you will go insane. So this is a movie like you just
We
said,
did.
Matt. You turn your brain off, pop some popcorn, and you just watch it, and it's just a good time. So I wouldn't recommend. It's not for everybody. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but I would
No.
say, it's a fun time. And if you watched The Howling 2 and you haven't seen The Howling 3, I feel like if you can hang with The Howling 2, you can hang with this movie. Sadly, there aren't a whole lot of boobs to keep you focused, but
No.
there's some really charming points in this movie, some really funny bits of dialogue, whether it's intentional or not. It's great. Um, so yeah, I mean that's kind of what I think about it. I think you should. I think it's worth a watch if you're into this kind of movie. Which, if you're listening to this, you probably are. Then yeah, I would definitely check that out. So at this point, I kind of already answered this for you, Matt. Sorry, but we're at your favorite part of the show, which is how does this movie rank on the TNA scale? Which it kind of doesn't, but take it away.
Uh, man, yeah, I'm gonna have to give this some 1.5 stars. It shouldn't even get that for the TNA, but I'm just giving it that because Imogen Ansley, who plays Jabba, is fucking beautiful, and even though
Yeah.
we only get the side boob that's covered in hair, and remember, if you pause it just right, you can see it. So that's why I'm giving it 1.5.
Look, I'm gonna give it an extra star just for having 6 breasts on 1 woman.
I like the way you think. I do like the way you think.
Yes. And like I said before, I wrote down the more the merrier. So truly, the more the merrier.
So is that your final thoughts for the movie?
Yeah, I think we've said as much as one can say
Or could
about The
possibly
Howling
say?
3.
Yep. Well, I guess that's all that I have for this episode of Video Express. We want to thank our sponsor, Troma Now. Be sure to subscribe to Troma Now at watch.troma.com and get your first month for free. Also, be on the lookout for Troma's latest film, directed by Lloyd Kaufman. Hashtag Shakespeare Shitstorm. Troma, 46 years of disrupting media.
Yes, thank you, Uncle Lloyd. Thank you, Trauma. And we also want to thank everybody who tuned into our show tonight or today or whenever you're listening to this. If we want to make the show as best as it can be. So if you have any suggestions, if you have ideas of a movie that we should cover, feel free to hit us up. At the time of us recording this, we don't have all of our social media and whatnot set up, but don't worry. By the time this episode comes out, I will have all the links and everything ready, so please tell us your thoughts. Let us know what you think. Let us know what we should chat about in the future.
Absolutely. We look forward to we're doing more episodes. And stay tuned. We're going to be doing these every 2 weeks, so bi-weekly we'll be releasing a new episode. Um, and we'll give you a little taste right now of what episode 3 is going to be.
Before the horror of Halloween, before the fear of Friday the 13th, before the evil of A Nightmare on Elm Street, before them all, there was popcorn. Buy a bag. Go home in a box.
All right, folks. So until next time, just remember, please be kind, rewind, but most importantly, just be kind. I'm Matt,
And I'm Katie.
And we'll catch you on the next episode of Video Express.
Bye.